It was supposed to be just another night of comedy until it wasn't. Chris Rock took the stage with his usual swagger, mic in hand, and that signature smirk ready to stir the pot. The crowd leaned in, waiting for the punchline, and then he dropped it. Melania doesn't live in the White House. She's trapped in there, praying Donald vanishes like one of his bankrupt casinos. The audience erupted. Laughter echoed. The jab hit hard. But just as the cheers peaked, the temperature in the room shifted. From the wings of the stage stepped Caroline Levitt. Sharp suit, sharper glare. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't backing down. With just a cool smile and a few well-placed words, she flipped the script and turned Chris Rock's joke into his own PR nightmare. He wasn't ready. The crowd wasn't ready. And what happened next? No one could have scripted it. Before we dive into the jaw-dropping exchange, let us know where you're watching from and hit subscribe so you don't miss stories that shake up politics, pop culture, and everything in between. The studio lights of The Pulse flared to life like camera flashes at a battlefield press conference. Rows of studio seats gleamed under golden beams, polished to a mirror finish. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, the kind that clung to the air before a thunderstorm. And at the center stood Samantha Pierce, host, journalist, and moderator-in-chief for the night. Her tailored red blazer glowed beneath the lights, her heels perfectly balanced on the pristine tile floor. She had done hundreds of interviews, but this one felt different. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said into the camera, smiling with a practiced grace. "Tonight, comedy meets controversy. Two of the most outspoken voices in America on one stage, one conversation, no filters." She paused. "Please welcome comedy legend Chris Rock and White House Press Secretary Caroline Levitt." The audience burst into applause. From stage left, Chris Rock emerged like a prize fighter in leather. He marched onto the stage. His grin was wide, his energy wild, and his eyes full of mischief. The crowd rose to meet him like old friends. Rock didn't wait. He grabbed the mic from the stand, smirked, and launched. "Melania Trump," he barked, eyes gleaming. "Come on now, that woman's not the first lady. She's the first hostage." The audience roared. "You seen her face in public? She looks like she's waiting for FEMA to rescue her from dinner with the president." Laughter echoed. Whistles and claps surged like a wave. Melania's not in a marriage. She's in a sequel to Castaway. And Donald? He's the volleyball. The crowd was losing it, doubling over, slapping knees, gasping for air. "I swear," Chris continued, pacing the stage, "Melania's probably got a help me sign hidden in her purse. Every time she waves, that's a signal." The camera panned to audience faces, cheeks flushed, eyes teary from laughter. Samantha laughed nervously. All right, Chris. Let's keep it respectful. Our other guest is here too." From stage right, another figure emerged. Calm, focused. Dressed in a midnight blue blazer and crisp white blouse, Caroline Levitt entered like she'd stepped into federal court, not a talk show. No smile, no swagger, just silence. Her heels clicked softly, measured, unhurried. The room that moments before had roared with laughter fell quiet. Not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. Chris spotted her. He smirked again. "Oh, look," he said, mic raised, voice still hot from applause. "Trump's rescue team has arrived." A few people chuckled, but others shifted. Caroline turned slightly, her eyes sharp, unblinking, locked onto Rock. She smiled, not with amusement, not with fear, but with calm. And that smile, it froze the room. Samantha cleared her throat, subtly adjusting in her chair. The air had grown heavier, like something real was about to start. She turned toward Caroline, her voice diplomatic but eager. "Caroline, you've heard Chris. He's made some sharp jokes about the First Lady. What's your response? Caroline didn't flinch, didn't blink. She rested both hands lightly on the glass tabletop, her posture straight, shoulders square. Chris, she began, voice low and even. You're funny. I grew up watching you. My father thought you were one of the best. But tonight, she leaned in. You weren't funny, you were petty, and you were wrong. The room shifted. Whispers swept through the crowd like a current. Chris raised an eyebrow. Oh, come on, he said, waving the mic. You can't be serious. You really don't think Melania wants out? Look at her face. Caroline turned slowly to face him fully. You've spent your career turning pain into punchlines, and you're good at it. But Melania Trump isn't your next bit. She's a woman, a mother, and a first lady who served this country with grace, while people like you mocked her from behind a mic. Gasps. A few heads nodded. You call her silent? Caroline continued. I call her strong. She let the silence linger, inviting it. No one moved. Chris rocked slightly in his chair, lips parted, but no joke came out. Caroline wasn't finished. While you were counting internet memes, Melania was visiting children's hospitals, hosting foreign leaders, representing America abroad, not for fame, not for applause, but because it was her duty. And she didn't turn it into a Netflix special. The audience exhaled, like it had been holding its breath. One woman in the front row whispered, That's right. Another clapped, then more joined. Chris shifted uncomfortably. He tried to laugh. So you're her press agent now? Caroline didn't blink. Number, I'm not here for damage control. I'm here because someone needs to say the truth when the room forgets how to. The applause grew. A man in the back shouted, She's speaking for us! Samantha turned to Chris, half smiling. Do you want to respond? Chris Rock opened his mouth, then closed it. Because in that moment, there wasn't a joke sharp enough, and Caroline Leavitt, unshaken, unwavering, wasn't playing his game. She was rewriting the rules. Chris Rock adjusted his jacket. His body leaned back, but his foot tapped nervously against the studio floor. Caroline's words still lingered like smoke in the air. Someone needs to say the truth when the room forgets how to. The audience hadn't moved. Even Samantha Pierce looked stunned, unsure if the usual rhythm of showbiz still applied. She glanced at her producer behind the camera, who was frozen in place. Chris forced a smirk. You know what's funny? He said, trying to revive the momentum. Every time I say something real about Trump, someone like you shows up acting like I've kicked the Pope. Some people chuckled, but it was faint, like background noise from another show. Melania's not royalty, Caroline. She knew what she signed up for. If you stand next to a lightning rod, you're going to get zapped. That's not comedy, that's physics. Caroline didn't blink. You're right, she said. It's not comedy, but your act tonight isn't physics. It's cowardice. The room gasped. Rock leaned forward. Cowardice? He asked. You calling me a coward? Caroline's voice was measured, steady. You don't punch up, Chris. You punch sideways. At women, at mothers, at the easy target who can't strike back because she's not here. That's not brave. That's safe. And it's cheap. Chris opened his mouth to reply, but Caroline was already on her feet. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't shout. She just stood there, unshaken, like a courtroom litigator presenting Exhibit A to the jury of America. Let's talk about who Melania Trump really is. She's a woman who left her homeland to build a life here. She speaks 5 languages. She's navigated more cultural hostility than any first lady in decades. While you've made millions mocking her accent and her outfits, she's visited wounded soldiers, worked on behalf of foster children, and led global anti-bullying initiatives. But tonight, she's not here to defend herself. So I will. A woman in the audience wiped away a tear. A man near the aisle murmured, Finally, Someone with class. Rock tried again. Okay, so she's got a few bullet points on a website. That doesn't mean she's not dying inside. Caroline stepped closer, eyes locked on his. You don't know her heart. You don't know her struggle. You just know how to turn her pain into a punchline. And that doesn't make you brave, Chris. It makes you lazy. The audience burst into applause. Not rowdy, just strong, unapologetic, like a crowd waking up from hypnosis. Chris sat back in his chair, blinking in disbelief. He wasn't used to this. Not to a young woman standing tall in the face of his legacy. Not to losing the room. Samantha's hand fluttered nervously across the cue cards. This wasn't the show they rehearsed. This was something different, unscripted, raw, real. Chris, she said gently, you want to respond? He gripped the mic like a lifeline. I'm not some clown here to take lectures from a 28-year-old intern in heels, he snapped. The crowd stirred. That didn't land well. Caroline didn't react. She didn't even blink. I'm not an intern, she said. I'm the White House press secretary. And heels don't weaken arguments. They elevate them. You've been on stage for 30 years, Chris. But tonight, you lost it. Chris stood suddenly. I lost nothing, he barked, sweat forming across his forehead. I say what everyone's thinking. I say what the cameras won't. That woman looks miserable next to Trump. She's never happy. She doesn't want to be there. Caroline walked forward, her words now echoing with righteous power. You saw a photo. I saw 20 years of loyalty. You saw a frown. I saw a woman protecting her child from the most ruthless media circus in modern history. You saw a first lady you could mock. I saw a mother, a patriot, and a woman with more grace in one silent photo than most celebrities manage in a career. Chris started to speak, but Caroline raised her hand. Let me finish. You called her a prisoner. You called her a prop. But Melania Trump chose to stand by her husband when the world mocked her, when you mocked her, and she did it with dignity. You think that's weakness? That's what strength looks like. The audience erupted. They were on their feet now, applauding, whistling, some even weeping. And Chris stood frozen, lost for words on the stage he once ruled. He lowered his mic. Samantha leaned in, voice hushed. We'll be right back after this. The camera cut to black. But the moment would never fade. Because Caroline Leavitt didn't shout. She didn't insult. She didn't twist the knife. She simply stood for a woman the world tried to laugh out of the room. And in doing so, she taught America how to respect again. It took less than an hour. Clips of the exchange. Caroline Leavitt calmly defending Melania Trump against Chris Rock's firestorm of mockery were spreading like wildfire across social media. The now iconic moment where Caroline leaned in and said, "You think her silence is weakness? I call it strength," was trending across every major platform. But it wasn't just trending. It was striking chords. Older Americans, many of whom had lived through decades of shifting cultural standards, saw in Caroline not just a political figure, but a young woman who stood for something they recognized: honor, family, and truth spoken without venom. Online headlines lit up. Chris Rock mocked, Caroline Leavitt silences with grace. Leavitt turns comedy stage into masterclass in respect. A comedian met a conservative and lost. Within hours, X was filled with heartfelt messages, not just from political pundits, but from grandparents, veterans, and lifelong mothers. She stood for Melania like I wish someone had stood for my wife when she was mocked at church for her accent. From veteran Arkansas, Caroline Leavitt didn't clap back. She stood up, calm, factual, proud. That's what we raised daughters to be. From retired teacher, Ohio. I didn't cry until she said Melania was strength in silence. I remember when women were admired for that. from Widow, North Carolina. The next morning, Chris Rock went live on Instagram. He sat in his luxury LA condo, wearing sunglasses indoors, his voice hoarse and unsteady. "Y'all really siding with her? That's just the Trump PR machine." He ranted, he chuckled, he threw out more jokes. But the comments said something else entirely. Caroline didn't yell, she won. Chris Rock used to be the sharpest guy in the room. Now he's just loud. She smiled while you fumed. Guess who the adults are now? Even his most loyal fans started slipping away, because the difference had been made painfully clear. He was trying to perform. She was telling the truth. That evening, cable news panels exploded with coverage. Fox News aired a segment titled, "Silence Over Shouting: How Caroline Leavitt Owned the Room Without Raising Her Voice." CNN, surprisingly, ran a story headlined, "When Class Met Comedy, a Culture Clash on the Pulse." Even neutral anchors couldn't deny it. One veteran broadcaster on a morning show said, "You don't see that every day. Someone that young, that calm in front of someone with Chris Rock's legacy." And she didn't blink. That wasn't politics. That was poise. The next day, Caroline appeared briefly on a local New Hampshire morning show. The host asked, "Did you plan your response to Chris Rock?" Caroline smiled. "Number, I just knew someone needed to say something. You don't tear down a first lady to get laughs. That's not comedy. That's cruelty." The clip got 18 million views. Because it wasn't just a message about Melania. It was a message about every woman who's ever been ridiculed for standing quietly beside someone they love. Some moments change careers. Others change culture. This one changed hearts. Across America, in quiet homes with Bibles on the coffee table and flags on the porch, viewers saw something they hadn't seen in years. A young woman, poised, passionate, and principled, take down arrogance not with rage, but with restraint. She didn't belittle. She didn't grandstand. She simply reminded the country that women can be strong without shouting, that defending someone's honor matters, even if they're not in the room. And that truth doesn't need a laugh track. It just needs a microphone and the courage to use it. She didn't storm the stage. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult. She defended. Caroline Leavitt showed that calm courage beats chaos. Do you think defending dignity is more powerful than tearing it down for laughs? Comment below. Your voice matters. And if you're tired of fame without honor and comedy without class, subscribe now. Because the more they mock our values, the stronger we become.